One question that gets asked a lot here in the studio, especially with students, but it is something that gets brought up amongst my musician friends quite frequently is who is the best drummer in the world? Well, I have my favorites, as I'm sure you do as well, have your favorite drummers. And that goes for favorite musicians of any kind. Um, I think, excuse me, we tend to have our favorite music that we listen to, and because of our favorite music, then we have our favorite musicians that are involved with that. So I did a quick little search on who the best drummer in the world was, and this was a recent poll, and there's um, 51 drummers listed here, and I'm not sure if they were meant to be in this order or not, because personally I would put some of these drummers in different orders. And I would say by and large, most of these drummers are rock drummers. Um, there's a couple jazz guys in here, a couple studio guys that are in here. But just looking at the list, I think this is probably based a lot on sales and popularity and things like that. I will say though, I've been doing these little drum reels every day. I didn't do one yesterday. Uh, I took I took yesterday off from that. I need to keep coming up with more material to keep posting, but um, I see some drum reels out there from drummers that seem like they're not even from this planet. The things that they do are just mind blowing. Super. There's that El Estra. I can't say his name. Um, El Estra Estapario, something like that. This kind of Spanish guy doing just insane drum work. A lot of times he's drinking coffee or something, and he's playing with one hand. His feet are going a million miles an hour, and man, there's no way that I would ever achieve that. And quite frankly, I have no reason to try to work on that for myself because I'm just going to stay in my lane, so to speak. There's incredible jazz guys out there that there's no way I can compete with that. Not that I'm trying to. And then there's these guys that do polyrhythms that are just phenomenal drummers. There's a lot of phenomenal drummers out in YouTube land and TikTok and Facebook and things like that that you see, and especially some of the younger kids are just mind blowing in their skills. Um, I was talking with some friends about that not long ago. Like, why do we think that might be? Has it always been that way and we just didn't know because social media made it possible to find a worldwide audience? Or did social media become well, I'm it has to be, but social media also became a resource for learning, and which is pretty incredible. you know, People of my age, I'm 50. Uh, when we were learning songs and trying to hear things, we would have our little cassette recorder next to the radio or built into the radio, and when we would record that favorite song and then rewind a whole bunch of times. And when stereos got really fancy, they had the bass boost on it. So you'd try to do that to hear what the kick drum's doing a little bit better. But we just had to like figure those things out on our own. Now you can go to YouTube and watch a tutorial exactly how to play Rosanna from Toto and do those shuffles and things like that. So I think the information available to us is pretty outstanding, and so you get these young kids that are just incredibly gifted little musicians. Aaron says best drummer in the world, Buddy Rich, then Fred Fisher. Thanks, Aaron. I've never seen Buddy Rich's name and my name in the same sentence um, as a positive. Thank you for that. Uh, Greg says they may not have made it made this list out. My favorite are Bernard Purdy and Daniel Glass. Daniel Glass, Daniel Glass, Daniel Glass. No, he's not on this list. I'll go through this list here in a moment, but yeah, Buddy Rich is on here, and same with Bernard Purdy. Uh, yeah. So anyway, what I was saying is there's these drummers out there that are just makes my head spin how incredible they are. It's pretty cool. And then, also there's guys, I think anytime any of us post things out there, I've definitely have experienced over the last few months to make a little short, put it out there, and then have people criticize or critique what I'm doing. Royal Crown Review. Okay. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that Daniel Glass is not on this list, but there's probably people that should be on here that aren't. This is a list of 51 drummers. I'll go through that here in a moment. But I did expect to see a lot more jazz kind of guys on here because these lists that I've seen in the past have included a lot of jazz guys, and I'm not familiar with all of these people on this list. Like I said, I tend to have my favorites that I listen to, and even my favorites I don't know everything about. Gary says Animal from the Muppets. Of course, he should be number one. I think Animal should be number one. Animal is probably definitely the most iconic drummer that's out there. Karen Carpenter should be, yes, you know what? 100% right, David. I'm going to put Karen on this list. She is not on this list. And I think people forget that about Karen. Not only was she a drummer, but she was a really good drummer. Really good drummer. I think that's one of those tragic stories about Karen Carpenter. Incredible voice, incredible musician, but had that. Now the name of what she had escapes me, but yeah, unfortunate loss with Karen Carpenter for sure. So, I feel like I have to preface everything that I'm going to say with the who's the best drummer in the world because it's so subjective to what we think. And like I said, this is a list of 51 drummers. I don't know who put this in this order, but here's the top 10. Ready for the top 10? The top 10 out of this 51 list. John Bonham in the number one spot. Not really a surprise. He is either the number one drummer in the world, referenced as such a lot, or very near the top, at least in the top 5. I meant to look before I got on. Maybe somebody knows, the answer to this. I'm not sure how old John Bonham was when he hit the music scene or how old he was when he passed away, but I'm going to assume he was pretty young. And that's a drummer that just had incredible feel and talent and groove and such a huge influence from somebody so young comparatively to where I am in my trips around the sun here. There's, John Bonham, just what an incredible influence as far as drumming goes. Yeah, Greg, there's so much great stuff about John Bonham. It's undeniable, especially his triplet fills and all of that. Really, really incredible. I had a student learn the song "Wonton" song by Led Zeppelin here recently. That and "Immigrant Song" and how incredibly those bass drum parts are. Just so cool. Number 2, Neil Peart from Rush, who has been my number one since I was a kid. Rush has always been my favorite band, and I think when I was young and I heard Tom Sawyer on the radio for the first time, just kind of had one of those moments where I was like, what is this that I'm listening to? And of course, at that time, I was zeroing in on what the drums were doing, and that was my big influence there. Um, but even with Rush being my favorite band, I don't have all their albums, and I don't know every one of their songs. So I guess I'm not a diehard fan. But over in the control room um, is uh, is my picture of Neil Peart on the wall, big poster thing, collage deal. Um, yeah, he's definitely a huge influence on me, especially younger, just trying to learn how to play everything off of moving pictures, everything off of signals, hold your fire, power windows. A lot of the 80s era Rush was, that's when I discovered them, and that's what I listened to. The older, earlier Rush, earlier 70s Rush and stuff, I don't connect with as much. Not saying that it's bad or anything like that. It's just not anything that really grabbed my attention. But anything from early 80s Rush and on, I'm more familiar with that stuff. And when I play music, when I'm writing drum parts and stuff, there's not really a lot of Rush influence that comes through. Maybe every once in a while there'll be a little spark of something, a little tip of the hat to some Neil Peart kind of parts. I think that my drumming probably resembles more like Scott Rockenfield from Queensryche kind of an approach to um, drum parts than what Neil Peart's influence had on me. And I think just that's because Midline's music is allows for that. So that's where that lives. So number 3, Keith Moon from the Who. I was never really a Who fan. That chaotic drumming didn't really do it for me. So yeah, I never really followed down that path. Number 4, Dave Grohl. We all know Dave Grohl from being in Nirvana and then Foo Fighters and stuff he's done with. I think he played on the first record from Queens of the Stone Age and played with Them Crooked Vultures. Now, Them Crooked Vultures, that how cool for Dave Grohl to be playing in a band with John Paul Jones on bass from Led Zeppelin. That's pretty incredible. Dave just has that really, really powerful drumming. Greg says, no clue who he is offhand, but your drums on the new Midline song remind me of Blackstone Cherry. Oh, Blackstone Cherry. That drummer is... Oh, I might be confusing him with another band. Dang it. I can't remember. I have to smack my head around a little and jar my memory. There was a band that Midline opened for, but it was an interesting situation because we were set up more like we were the headliner band, but I thought it was Blackstone Cherry. They played an acoustic set after we were done. Shoot, Greg, I can't remember for sure. Yeah, but thanks. That drum fill that's in Onward right before the instrumental bridge section is more of a Neil Peart influenced, probably kind of a Neil Peart, John Bonham infused drum fill. And it's kind of it's a drum fill that I like playing, and I just took advantage of, like, here's a spot where this is going to work. So that's where I was. Number 5, they have Sheila E. in there. Sheila E. played with Prince and a ton of other people. Got a lot of Latin stuff happening with Sheila E. Incredible drummer. This is interesting because when a few years ago when David Letterman had drum solo week, I think he did it for 2 weeks, but Sheila E. was one of the people that he had on as a drum solo, and she was playing in like 4-inch heels and just murdering the drums. And when people talk about the shoes they wear to drum in, like, oh, I can't play in this kind of shoe, or I have to play barefoot, or I have to do this or whatever. I'm looking at Sheila E. in 4-inch heels, destroying all of us other drummers who are so picky about the shoes we're wearing and how impossible it is to play unless we have this special shoe on. I think talent and ability has so much to do with it, more than the tread on our shoes. I will say, though, that some shoes are hard to play in. Like if you're wearing, steel-toed work boots, those are quite heavy and a little bit difficult to play drums in. But here's Sheila, 4-inch heels, just laying it down. Number 6 was Buddy Rich. So there's Buddy Rich. Buddy is normally near that 1 to 3 top spot. So, like, I don't know who authored this list, but they have Buddy Rich clocking in at number 6. Number 7, right behind him, Ringo Starr. Ringo Starr is one of those drummers out there that, again, had just this huge influence on culture, because when the Beatles came out, that was something new and fresh and nobody had seen or heard before. And so, everybody talks about the big Ed Sullivan show that they were on, and the power of television and reaching millions of people, and seeing Ringo Starr playing, and that just caused a lot of people to pick up the drumsticks and want to play music along with everybody else in the Beatles. From a technical point of view, I wouldn't say that Ringo was the best drummer, but I see a lot of people cutting him up because he's not Mike Portnoy. Well, no, of course he's not Mike Portnoy. He's Ringo Starr, and he was the guy that was in the Beatles. Being in the band isn't necessarily because you're the best guy in the world at your instruments, because you're the best guy to be in that band. I think that goes same for Lars Ulrich from Metallica. Here's two guys that had unbelievably successful, incredible careers, and they got to do music for their whole life as a living, and quite well. I think it's funny, the basement drummers surface out of the ground to criticize those guys, and it's unfortunate. If you're so good and so talented and you're better than them, then why are you still not living that dream? I think it's a good reflective question to ask of themselves, don't you? 8, Stuart Copeland from the Police. He would probably be in my top 10. So there you go. Ginger Baker at number 9, and then at number 10, Phil Collins. So that's the top 10 that I found this morning, going there. Let's see. Phil Collins, incredible Genesis and his own career, his solo career. I think this was a question posed probably 10 years ago now, but I don't remember the details specifically, but it was like the 2 highest paid drummers in the world. I think they said drummers were as part of a group and a solo career, like who were the 2 highest paid drummers, and it was Phil Collins and it was why is the drummer from the Eagles escaping me? Don Henley. Don Henley and Phil Collins were the 2 highest paid drummers in the world from being in a band and as a solo artist, which I thought Ringo Starr was going to be outdo either of those two guys, but it wasn't the case at least 10 years ago. Moving along. So the next five would be Danny Carey and Mike Portnoy. So Danny Carey at 11, number 12, Mike Portnoy, two progressive metal drummers. Again, these, depending on what we like, we would probably move those guys further up the list and maybe take Dave Grohl and Sheila E. out of there. I don't know how this list is compiled, if it's by net worth or album sales or things like that. Number 13 was Alex Van Halen. Alex Van Halen is one of those drummers that always surprised me that he doesn't get mentioned sooner when people start talking about some of the best drummers in the world. Alex Van Halen has always been the drummer for Van Halen. I'm not aware of him doing anything else other than that. So he didn't have to wear a lot of hats necessarily, and maybe, he didn't want to or need to. But I think definitely he and his brother, of course, Eddie, had a huge influence on people choosing to play music. Number 14, Chad Smith from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. It's funny when people compare. We always want to make comparisons, which I understand that when I'm trying to describe Midline to somebody. Well, what's your music like? Well, you start trying to make some kind of comparison. Like, okay, if you liked the Seattle music scene, you probably would like Midline. So if you like Soundgarden and Alice in Chains and bands like that, you highly probable that you would enjoy listening to Midline, even though I think Midline still had more of a shiny appearance to us, or more of a hard rock thing rather than a grunge thing. But I think a lot of that has to do with the timbre of Anthony's voice that might steer people towards those comparisons. When I've been drumming, a lot of people want to compare me to like Morgan Rose or Shannon Larkin, Will Smith, not Will Smith, Will Hunt, Will Hunt, who drums for Evanescence. And I think a lot of that has to do with just their showmanship style is more how I play. Post grunge, yeah, I could see that, Greg. Yeah, definitely. We were a '90s band, so we had that going for us, and that the one thing is that, Midline didn't really follow a trend necessarily. We just were doing what we do, and it just happened to fall in line with certain bands. I know that when Creed came out in 1997, people would say, "Oh, you guys sound like Creed." No, Creed sounds like Midline. when you have a 7-year leg up on the other guys, I think they sound more like Midline than Midline sounding like Creed. So they just had a lot more success than what we did. Let's see. Mitch Mitchell is at number 15. 16 is Travis Barker. How would you describe Blink-182? So that's more of like a poppy punk kind of a sound. I never really got into Blink-182 necessarily, but I know that Travis Barker has had a huge influence on young drummers. And so I think probably with Travis Barker, he probably is not necessarily stuck, but he's put in a certain place in music because of Blink-182. But if you dig a little deeper into Travis Barker, he's got a lot of drum corps type skills and influence. Good morning, John. Pop punk, but Travis is so good. Yes, yeah, Travis is really, really great. But I think he gets looked over sometimes as just being this kind of a punk drummer and not being technically proficient, which actually he is. Yeah, very, very much so a great technical drummer. And again, a huge career, huge career. It's funny that people will come out of the woodwork and criticize people with these big careers, thinking that they don't have much talent. Um, but there's so much more involved with with that. You have to have ability. I think that goes almost without saying. But it's the music that you're playing, is that resonating with an audience that can help you have that career. And obviously Blink 182 was able to do that. Coming in at number 17, Jeff Porcaro, or Porcaro, I guess depending on where you're from is how you're going to say that. I always said Jeff Porcaro, and then I heard somebody else say Porcaro recently, and I thought, maybe they're right and I'm wrong. I don't know. I've always said Jeff Porcaro. See, these are one of these. Jeff Porcaro is one of those drummers that you think would be way further up the list, but so that's like maybe the popularity of drummers probably pushed him down in the list a little bit further. But Jeff Porcaro playing the drummer for Toto, amongst being an incredible session drummer and just incredibly gifted musician. And I think he passed away like in 1992. I think it was 1992. I have the Modern Drummer magazine that they put out shortly after he passed away. And I know I was on tour with the band from Florida when that happened. And I immediately went and bought that Modern Drummer from some music store, I think somewhere in Michigan or something like that, wherever we were. So I still have that, one of my little treasures. Number 18, Clyde Stubblefield. Again, another incredible musician. But some of these guys who are older or sort of slowly being forgotten in their music timeline. 19, Michael Shreve. I can't think of who that is, but he was at number 19 on this list. And then at number 20 was Charlie Watts. If you put Charlie Watts next to Neil Peart, obviously two incredibly different worlds of drummers. Charlie Watts could never play in Rush, and I don't think that Neil Peart could ever play in the Rolling Stones. There's so much involved with like your personality and your taste and all of those things. I'm not saying that Neil Peart can sit down and play Charlie Watts drum parts, but it's always right person, right seat as far as I'm concerned. But both those guys had huge influence on the music world. I would put Charlie Watts and Ringo Starr probably closer together, and not super flat. I mean, Charlie Watts just sat there as like kind of stone face most of the time, and Charlie Watts had a unique way. If you guys listen to Rolling Stones, listen to how Charlie Watts typically doesn't just play straight rhythm on the hi-hat. Like he won't play just straight eighth notes. He tends to, whatever the rhythm of the bass drum is doing is the rhythm that he plays on the hi-hat at the same time. And that was pointed out to me a long, long time ago. And once that was brought to my attention, I really can hear that in those Rolling Stone songs. And it just, I think, helps capture and create that groove. The next group, starting at 21, Matt Cameron from Soundgarden, and is also the drummer for Pearl Jam. I like his drumming in Soundgarden much better than Pearl Jam. I think Pearl Jam kind of lost me after their second record, so I kind of stopped paying attention to them. I really like all the Soundgarden albums, and I think his drumming on that's incredible. And Matt Cameron was one of those guys that had your basic 5-piece drum setup that you would, is kind of the run of the mill. So he didn't have like some super flashy, cool looking drum set, at least as far as I was concerned, but what a monster drummer. Phil Rudd at number 22 from AC/DC, just meat and potatoes drumming, super solid. No fast drum fills, just And a lot of songs really no drum fills. Back in Black is one of those that doesn't have anything really complicated happening in it. Speaking of Back in Black, and not being complicated, I saw a drummer on TikTok saying um, how boring and sleepy the drum parts were for Back in Black. Because Back in Black is just 1 and 3 on the kick, 2 and 4 on the snare, eighth notes on the hi-hat. Never plays the ride cymbal in the whole song that I can think of. So he decides to play some other drum beat, some kind of like swing, kind of like, instead of just doom, he's like doom, ta, da, dum, ka, ga, and it was so far away from the groove of the song. This is where like opinions really start flowing, but that guy posted that, and I didn't leave any comments or anything, but there was just people just really cutting him up for attempting to play Back in the Black with a swing feel to it, and not just a swing feel, but not a good one. And then the da 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 boom was super choppy too. It was like, okay, guy, you might want to just immerse yourself in the simplicity of what that is and how big it sounds. It's incredible. Number 23, Gene Krupa. Normally, Gene Krupa is much closer in relation to Buddy Rich when these lists come out. Again, a huge jazz influence. I often wondered, though, if Gene Krupa ever felt like he was kind of in the shadow of Buddy Rich. I'm assuming those guys were friends because they did a lot of little special things together. But I think when you first think of drummers like that, you probably think of Buddy before Gene Krupa. But nonetheless, another huge influence. 24, Ian Pace from Deep Purple. Number 25, Bill Bruford. Number 26, Dave Lombardo, who was from Slayer, on this list. Here's an interesting what am I trying to say? The next on the list after Dave Lombardo is Bernard Purdie. So you've got this king of shuffle beats right next to Dave Lombardo from Slayer. Interesting choice of where they landed in this list, whoever compiled this list. And then after that, Steve Gadd. So, I would personally take Bernard Purdie and Steve Gadd and move them way further up the list than Dave Lombardo. But that's just me. But again, these guys are further behind or further in the history of drumming, so that's where you'd see some of the newer influences, like your Dave Grohls and things, higher up on the list. Next would be Questlove, and then at number 30, Billy Cobham. Anybody in Boise go see Billy Cobham a little over a year ago at the Egyptian? It was fantastic. It was great. But I thought the highlight of that concert was the guy playing guitar. Unbelievable. I'm not familiar with who he is, but he was flat out amazing guitarist. And I kind of felt like the audience's attention kind of did shift to the guitar player, but Billy Cobham being the drummer in this massive drum kit, and also Billy Cobham being 80 years old. He was probably 81 now. To see a man that physically fit behind this ginormous drum set and play like he played was mind-blowing and inspiring too. Like, we should all be taking care of ourselves so that we can be in our 80s and play drums like that. Holy crap, it was really spectacular. Coming in at number 31, Bill Ward from Black Sabbath. 32, Levon Helm. 33, Max Weinberg. 34, Hal Blaine. This one really gets me. I laughed when I wrote this down. Number 35, Meg White. why is Meg White even on the radar of the best drummers in the world? No idea. It seems pretty easy to substitute her with just about anybody else. Somebody mentioned Karen Carpenter earlier on. I can't remember who suggested her, but yeah, I would. Meg White, really? See, that's where my opinion surfaces a little bit more on influential drummers. Meg White, I could think of. Good grief, I would. There's Jen Ledger. If you want a female drummer, there's Jen Ledger from Skillet, who's a much better drummer than Meg White and probably more popular. If you want to make it a popularity contest. Yeah, how Meg White. Again, that might be just an album sales thing. If you're looking at the White Stripes, that's the only reason I can imagine that Meg White would be on that list. Sorry, Meg White, if you ever hear of this. Maybe even Meg White would go, why am I on that list? I don't know. Number 36, Lars Ulrich. We already talked about him from Metallica. Again, he's another drummer that kind of gets under attack from not being some amazing drummer. Well, he's the amazing drummer that's in Metallica that's sold millions and millions and millions and millions of records and toured the world and had the life that he wanted. So for people to criticize that, I guess I'm eating my own words just talking about Meg White, right? And I think Lars Ulrich is a much better drummer than Meg White too. Yeah, the Meg White one. I'm not feeling that one. 37, Cozy Powell. 38, Terry Bozzio. Again, this Cozy Powell and Terry Bozzio, and then Elvin Jones. Those drummers too. I just think that their careers have been. I don't want to say that they're irrelevant anymore, but they're not as well known as they had been in the past. So, yeah. Did anybody see a recent Terry Bozzio does these drumming things on Drum Channel? I think Drum Channel is somehow associated with Drum Workshop. Terry Bozzio was on a thing recently, and when I first saw him drumming, I thought it was an old woman behind the drums playing. And then I had to do a double take. I was like, that's Terry Bozzio, which kind of blew me away because in my mind, I always had this picture of health and fitness when it came to Terry Bozzio. And here he was pretty bloated looking, and maybe he's got a medical condition. I don't know. But again, if you went and started looking through the comments of that performance on Drum Channel, there was a lot of people really concerned with how he looked, considering he'd always been a very fit and skinny guy. Greg says, Caesar from Golden Earring, I will shoot you a video of him live. Oh, cool. Hope that when I'm his age, I could still, and then I have the Seymour problem. So number 40, Thomas Hake, or is it Hack? Hake or Hack from Meshuggah. I've not really listened to Meshuggah, but I know that Thomas has these drum sample packs that you can buy and create drum loops and things when you're recording. I have several guitar player friends who use his drum sample pack. So it's actually him drumming recorded, and you can build drum loops and things and stuff of Thomas actually playing the drums. It's not like Superior Drummer. It's an actual real person playing. So sometimes when I get demos sent to me on songs to learn to record, it's Thomas Hake drum parts, and I'm like, oh, do you want me to play this exactly that way? And sometimes it's yes, and sometimes it's no. It's just we want that feel. So if I don't have to copy Thomas drum parts perfectly, I'm much more happy with that. It's like the pressure's off a little bit. Number 41, Jim Keltner. Again, I think that he would be probably in the top 20, 25, just with his session work. Vinny Colaiuta, again, could be higher on the list. 43, Carmine Appice. 44, Tommy Lee. He's probably about where he belongs in that list of best drummers in the world. Although, if you were a huge Motley Crue fan, you might move Tommy Lee into your top 10 favorite drummers. It's hard to say. I know when I was younger, I was definitely influenced by Tommy Lee. I remember being in high school, and on the inside of my locker door, I had a cutout of Tommy Lee's and his drum kit there. And I mean, I've always had pictures of drummers and drums, and it's like looking at Ferraris, and just I was always shiny things, cool looking drum sets by drummers who put on big shows, and that was like a thing for me with Tommy Lee, was just this huge big movements in his playing, and the power in his playing always influenced me, definitely. But in this current list, I think he probably is. Again, his career's not where it was in the early '80s, so there's other drummers that have moved up in this list. Number 45 being Kenny Aronoff. Kenny didn't really have an influence on me younger. He has more influence on me now because I started paying attention to his interviews, and I got his book 2 years ago, I think. It's called Sex, Drums, Rock and Roll. If you haven't read that book by Kenny Aronoff, it's really great. It's hard to put that book down. It's a great read. And Kenny's had this amazing career where he's played with just about everybody. Played with them on TV, toured with them, recorded on their records. His resume is steep and impressive, and he just seems like a great guy. I mentioned this to my parents yesterday when I was over at their house for Christmas, as just the access that we have to people is great and fairly easy to reach people by sending an email or a message. Chip, hey buddy, awesome you're here. Merry Christmas, and hope you're doing great. Chip says yo, so I'm guessing, Chip, you put yo because that's typically what I first put when I get on Drummer's Education Connection, is I'll say yo. I'm paying attention, buddy. I know what's going on here. Yeah. Well, Chip Ritter is here. Chip Ritter is an amazing drummer too. Chip, you should be on this list of best drummers in the world. You definitely should be. That would be awesome. That would be awesome. So yeah, I was mentioning Kenny Aronoff, and the accessibility that we have to people like Chip here. I was telling my parents that I've made connections with other drummers around the world, just simply saying, hey, how's it going? Not asking for anything, just making connections. And I had watched a Kenny Aronoff interview or something like 2 weeks ago, and I thought, I've heard that Kenny is really good about responding. So just as an experiment more than anything, I sent Kitty a message and I said, "Hey, I appreciate your drumming and these things that you do are really inspiring. Hope our paths cross someday." That's all I said. And the very next day, I got a message back. "Fred, great to hear from you. Yeah, I look forward to meeting you." Okay. uh, that was pretty awesome that he responded and said that. Number 46, Roger Taylor from Queen. 47, I don't even know if I could pronounce this name correctly. Ziggy Modelest. See, I don't know how to read or speak, apparently. I'm not sure who he is. Al Jackson Jr. at number 49, Steve Smith. And then number 50, Cindy Blackman. And then why this list goes to 51, I don't know. Maybe they just had to squeeze Larry Mullen Jr. in on here. But I'm sure all of us could come up with 10 drummers that I did not name and say, wow, this person really had some kind of influence on my drumming. Morgan Rose from Seven Dust is one that's not on this list, who I typically have been seeing on these best drummer lists. Shannon Larkin from Godsmack. Let's see. Like, I know that when I first started like really getting into music and listening to music, I mentioned Rush earlier. Like when I heard Tom Sawyer on the radio, I was blown out of the water. That was one of those things for me. I was a huge fan of Stryper. And I used to buy the black painted Zildjian drumsticks, and then I would take yellow electrical tape and make them striped and play along to Stryper records. So I really, really liked Stryper. And it was kind of cool. My band, which is no longer together, Cure for the Fall, that was our last show. We didn't know it was going to be our last show, but our last show was opening for Stryper. And meeting those guys was really cool. And getting to open for them was truly awesome. But yeah, like, so, the hair metal bands of the 80s, the Sunset Strip bands, I really did like those bands, like Poison and Warrant and Dokken. Who am I not thinking of at the moment? But bands like that, I really did like playing along. But then when I discovered Queensryche, I would always have this band that I would discover, and then I'd play along to their records like mad for months and hours and all of those kind of things. And I was if I liked it, I played along all the time. So I could be playing along to Queensryche, and then when NXS's record Kick came out, I played along to that over and over too. Totally different style of playing, more poppy dance type stuff. But I think at my core was always rock drumming, so that was where I tended to gravitate to most. With my students, it's interesting to hear what they're listening to. The way that younger people listen and consume music is so different from when I was that age. I was usually tied to the radio or buying cassettes and then CDs and playing along to those. Now it's just somebody finds a single on Spotify or something, and that's that one song. It seems like it's harder to get people all in on an artist to really dive into their whole body of work. Just kind of the singles are what's ruling the world. It was, at least appears to me to be the case. But going back to when I was a kid, just I play along to records like I mentioned. But the other thing is, I don't know if my dad had mentioned something about playing different styles of music, or maybe my band teacher did, or I don't know how it happened exactly, but it was suggested to me by somebody about playing a lot of different styles of music and having to switch between those styles really, really quick. And so I used to do this about once a week. When I would be practicing, I would just turn on the radio, and whatever song was on the radio, I would play to, even if was unfamiliar with it. And I would keep listening to that station playing whatever the next song was until commercials or the radio personality would start talking. I'd immediately change the station. So I would just, whatever the next station was, I would start playing along to that. And I would work myself up and down the radio aisle. And I would do this for hours, just finding different songs to play along to. I tended to skip the rap, the rap station that was playing more stuff like that. I guess I couldn't. I would suffer through playing along to country music, which is funny since I play in a country band now with Cliff Miller. But at any rate, I would just do that over and over and over, and I thought it was great experiment to do. Even if I came across like a kind of easy listening type jazz station, I would do my best to try to play along to that, and away I would go. So through that, you discover different bands and drummers and things like that, and just keep playing. So that's that list of the best drummers in the world. This list of 51. That was just what popped up first in my search. That was the most recent thing. Like I said, I don't know who authored that list, but there you have it.